The apartment shook with a slammed door and a sob spiking the night, and Maya Brooks said, "Who is at my door at 2 in the morning?" The intercom crackled with breath, and Jordan Cole said, "I messed up." Silence pressed like rain clouds inside the hallway as Maya said, "Jordan, speak clear." A laugh broke and died, and Jordan said, "I asked you to have my child like it was business, and it broke something in me." The words burned, and Maya said, "You dropped that like a contract, not a promise." A second voice recording chimed from her phone, and Jordan said, "I can't lose you, not to pride, not to fear." The intercom hissed, and Maya said, "You vanished after the gala. You left me in a room of whispers." The elevator dinged like a verdict, and Jordan said, "Vanessa cornered me with a story that wasn't true." Wind rattled the corridor window, and Maya said, "Rumors travel faster than apologies." A fist rested on the door as Jordan said, "Open, please." Her pulse counted out years of history in seconds, and Maya said, "You want a future without a present." The lock clicked like a confession, and Jordan said, "I was afraid you would say no." The hallway light flickered, and Maya said, "I was afraid you would not ask with love." The door stayed barely open, and Maya said, "You chose a deal over devotion." Jordan's eyes searched the crack like a map of regrets, and he said, "I chose panic." Memory climbed the walls, and Maya said, "You made my body a project plan." He flinched, and Jordan said, "I hear it now, and it sounds cruel." The storm softened, and Maya said, "You vanished after you asked, like it cost you nothing." His jaw set, and Jordan said, "It cost me my steadiness." The hallway clock ticked toward a thin morning, and Maya said, "Words last longer than storms." The elevator chimed again, and Jordan said, "Vanessa told me you were already considering someone else." Heat rose in her chest, and Maya said, "Vanessa wants your devotion to be her trophy." He touched the doorframe like it might forgive him, and Jordan said, "I want to rebuild without bargaining." A neighbor's footsteps crossed the far end, and Maya said, "Truth first, then mercy later." The night thinned, and Jordan said, "I am here for the truth, even if it ruins me." The phone vibrated with a message pinned like a thorn, and Maya said, "Tasha is downstairs." Jordan stepped back and he said, "She always keeps you honest." The elevator shuttered open, and Tasha Reed said, "I came because the building chat lit up with drama." Maya exhaled, and Tasha said, "Tell me he apologized with more than a business pitch." Jordan faced the truth in her tone, and he said, "I am not that man tonight." Tasha's eyes steadied the room, and she said, "Then say why you asked the way you did." He folded his pride, and Jordan said, "I was scared of losing her to time." Maya watched the words hang like fragile glass, and she said, "Love does not start with a ledger." The storm drifted toward sunrise, and Tasha said, "Either rebuild the bridge or stop blocking the river." Silence gathered, and Jordan said, "Bridge or nothing. I choose bridge." The building door swung again, and feathers of perfume preceded Vanessa Price. And Tasha said, "Here comes gasoline." Vanessa smiled like a verdict, and Vanessa said, "I hope I didn't interrupt your midnight proposals." Maya steadied her breath, and Maya said, "You deal in echoes, not facts." Jordan's stare tightened, and Jordan said, "Why tell her I had another plan?" Vanessa tilted her head, and Vanessa said, "Because power needs an audience." Tasha stepped closer, and Tasha said, "Power without truth is just noise." The lobby air iced, and Vanessa said, "He asked you because you are safe, not sacred." The word cut, and Maya said, "I am both when love is real." Jordan flinched, and Jordan said, "Vanessa, leave the rot you brought." Vanessa's smile faded, and Vanessa said, "We'll see if the rot was already here." The elevator closed her reflection into steel. When quiet finally returned, the city hummed like a low apology, and Maya said, "I won't be bartered." Jordan nodded into the wait, and Jordan said, "I will not offer terms, only truth." Tasha eyed the door like a sentinel, and Tasha said, "Then start with why Vanessa had room to speak at all." He breathed slow, and Jordan said, I left a window open called Pride. Maya pictured old hurts filing in, and Maya said close it with action, not lines. The lobby clock claimed the hour, and Jordan said breakfast, honesty, and no defenses. Tasha softened, and Tasha said, make it simple and clean. Footsteps echoed from the stairwell, and Maya said, if we do this, we do it with dignity. Jordan's shoulders eased, and Jordan said, dignity first, always. The storm emptied to sky, and Maya said, then the day begins with truth. Morning pooled like mercy across Maya's kitchen, and Maya said, truth before coffee. Jordan set down a paper bag of croissants, and Jordan said, then honesty it is. Tasha leaned against the counter, and Tasha said, no spin today. The kettle hissed like a warning, and Maya said, when you asked me, I felt handled, not held. The words trembled but stood, and Jordan said, I mistook planning for care. The window caught a thin sun, and Tasha said, care starts with seeing her, not scheduling her. Jordan traced a ring of condensation, and Jordan said, I wanted certainty, and forgot tenderness. The clock nudged them forward, and Maya said, my body is not your legacy vault. He bowed his head, and Jordan said, I am sorry for shrinking you to a goal. Silence softened to breath, and Tasha said, regret is cheap without changed behavior. Maya folded the napkin once, and Maya said, if love lives, it speaks in patience. Jordan steadied his voice, and Jordan said, then I will listen until the walls trust me. Kettle clicked off, and Tasha said, start by asking what she needs, not what you want. Hope hovered, but did not land. Steam curled from mugs like new vows, and Maya said, I need safety that feels lived, not promised. Jordan lifted his eyes, and Jordan said, what builds that for you? Tasha watched the steam rise, and Tasha said, consistency, not grand gestures. The street below murmured awake, and Maya said, no decisions about me without me. Jordan nodded, and Jordan said, we co-author every page. The phrase softened the room, and Tasha said, then delete the boardroom voice. A sparrow tapped the fire escape, and Maya said, also, distance from Vanessa. His jaw tightened, and Jordan said, I will set that boundary in writing and action. The kettle's ghost heat lingered, and Tasha said, accountability has receipts. Maya traced a crescent on the table, and Maya said, I want time without pressure. Jordan breathed slow, and Jordan said, no deadlines, only presence. Outside a siren faded, and Tasha said, then start by walking, not sprinting. The day felt possible again. They stepped into a small neighborhood park, and Maya said, I grew up measuring exits. Gravel crunched like old habits, and Jordan said, who taught you that? The wind tugged leaves into quiet spirals, and Maya said, a father who left without goodbye. Tasha slowed beside the bench, and Tasha said, you learned to survive without asking. Sun patched through branches, and Jordan said, I asked you to carry a future while I hoarded the present. A jogger drifted past, and Maya said, I will not be a vessel for your fear. The words landed, and Jordan said, then let me unlearn scarcity. A child's laugh rose, and Tasha said, joy is not a luxury, treat it like rent. The breeze cooled the heat in Maya's chest, and Maya said, if we ever try for a child, it must come from devotion. He pressed a hand to the bench, and Jordan said, no timelines, no contracts. A cloud moved, and Tasha said, then write new rules in how you show up. The path curved toward light, and possibility followed. Back at Maya's, the doorbell pierced the calm, and Tasha said, let me. Vanessa stood with a sleek smile, and Vanessa said, I came to apologize in person. The apology wore perfume like armor, and Maya said, speak plain, or go. Vanessa's gaze flickered, and Vanessa said, I pushed a rumor to test his devotion. Jordan exhaled hard, and Jordan said, you tested us like a market stunt. Wind rattled the hallway plant, and Tasha said, say why you need control. Vanessa's laugh thinned, and Vanessa said, power steadies me when love does not. The admission chilled the air, and Maya said, "We are not your stage." Vanessa held the apology like glass, and Vanessa said, "Then I will step back." Jordan studied the floor, and Jordan said, "Step back and stay back." Silence gathered behind the click of her heels, and Tasha said, "Close that chapter, lock it." The bell did not ring again. Afternoon stretched across the living room, and Maya said, "I want to remember why we mattered." Jordan sat forward, and Jordan said, "Because you taught me gentleness without collapse." Tasha moved toward the window, and Tasha said, "Name the moments that prove it." Dust swam in a gold shaft, and Maya said, "Your laugh when my car died at midnight." A grin cracked the gloom, and Jordan said, "And your hand on my shoulder at the hospital." The air held their history, and Tasha said, "Memory is a bridge if you walk it together." Maya steadied her breath, and Maya said, "We can try again, but we will not hurry." The couch sighed under the weight of decision, and Jordan said, "I will earn slow trust." The city hummed like a heartbeat, and Tasha said, "Then protect the quiet you just built." Sunlight warmed the rug, and Maya said, "Dinner at my pace, not your calendar." Jordan stood with care, and Jordan said, "Your pace is the only pace now." The day ended kinder than it began. Evening pressed against the restaurant windows like a test, and Maya said, "We ordered time, not tension." Jordan glanced at the reserved sign, and Jordan said, "I wanted quiet for us." The hostess drifted away, and Tasha said, "Quiet does not erase history." A trio of investors waved, and Jordan said, "They can wait." The linen held their hands apart, and Maya said, "We are not a pitch deck." He nodded once, and Jordan said, "I am unlearning the sale." Silverware chimed, and Tasha said, "Then stop managing love like risk." A bottle opened with a sigh, and Maya said, "No wine if truth gets blurry." The server retreated, and Jordan said, "I met my lawyer to cut Vanessa from the board." The words steadied the table, and Tasha said, "Receipts matter." A phone buzzed and paused, and Maya said, "We eat first, we decide later." The room softened to candlelight, and Jordan said, "Tell me how to be near you without claiming you." A violin stitched the air, and Maya said, "Start by hearing no and staying." The city breathed beyond the glass, and Jordan said, "I will stay for the no as much as the yes." The first course arrived like a peace offering, and Maya said, "Boundaries are not walls." Jordan set his phone face down, and Jordan said, "Tonight it is a brick." Tasha tested the edge of a smile, and Tasha said, "Progress looks like this." A waiter poured water with care, and Maya said, "I need clarity about our pace." Steam lifted from the dish, and Jordan said, "We move when you lead." A couple laughed behind them, and Tasha said, "Ignore the audience." The city lights sharpened, and Maya said, "Our story is not for spectators." The violinist shifted melody, and Jordan said, "I will protect the private." Cutlery sang again, and Tasha said, "Then defend it in public too." Maya traced a circle on the linen, and Maya said, "Tomorrow we cook at my place." Relief warmed his face, and Jordan said, "I will bring ingredients, not conditions." The server returned with dessert by mistake, and Tasha said, "Save sweet for earned endings." The room felt closer, and Maya said, "We begin with simple food and unarmed words." Outside, air smelled like wet pavement and chances, and Tasha said, "I will grab a ride." Headlights braided the boulevard, and Jordan said, "Thank you for guarding the edges." Tasha stepped back with a steady grin, and Tasha said, "Guard your center too." A rideshare eased to the curb, and Maya said, "She kept us honest." The door closed on taillights, and Jordan said, "Honesty is heavy and good." A gust lifted Maya's curls, and Maya said, "I still feel the bruise of that question." He met the wind and did not blink, and Jordan said, "I will not press the bruise." Crosswalk signals clicked, and Maya said, "Prove it in the quiet moments." His breath met the cool night, and Jordan said, "I will do dishes in silence." Street vendors laughed nearby, and Maya said, also learn to withstand my fear without fixing me. He nodded, and Jordan said, I will hold fear without a plan. The light turned, and together they crossed toward a softer version of the night. The next afternoon, groceries turned the counter into colors, and Maya said, we cook slow. Jordan rolled up sleeves, and Jordan said, we speak slower. The recipe card leaned like a witness, and Maya said, my mother taught me this stew. He rinsed vegetables with quiet care, and Jordan said, teach me the patience inside it. The pot warmed, and Maya said, stir without scraping the past. He smiled small, and Jordan said, I can learn that motion. The radio hummed an old soul track, and Maya said, her voice carried me through breakage. Spoons clinked, and Jordan said, I want to be part of repair, not replacement. Steam perfumed the room, and Maya said, repair means admitting what you broke. He met her eyes, and Jordan said, I reduced you to an outcome. The admission settled, and Maya said, name me as person, not promise. He nodded, and Jordan said, Maya, not milestone. The stew answered with a low, forgiving simmer. They ate at the small table, steam rising like hope that learned restraint, and Maya said, this tastes like a beginning. Jordan let the spoon rest, and Jordan said, I hear the lesson in it. The window framed a patient evening, and Maya said, trust is a daily meal. He breathed the spice, and Jordan said, then I will hunger for showing up. Dishes waited without complaint, and Maya said, I still need distance from the word child. He nodded, and Jordan said, I retire the word until you resurrect it. A siren wailed, then faded, and Maya said, I want to study us, not outcomes. He leaned back with care, and Jordan said, I will honor study hours. Silence placed a hand on both their shoulders, and Maya said, if fear returns, we speak it before it hardens. His eyes steadied, and Jordan said, we will not let silence ferment. The city dimmed to pearl, and together they decided to remain in the room with their learning until it became ease. Morning cracked clean until the email landed like a siren, and Maya said, read it aloud. Jordan scrolled with a stiff hand, and Jordan said, a guardianship clause naming Vanessa custodian. The room shrank to the glow of the screen, and Maya said, who signed that? His throat worked like a jammed hinge, and Jordan said, it uses my signature stamp from the office vault. Wind brushed the fire escape, and Maya said, someone wanted ownership, not family. He steadied the laptop, and Jordan said, the draft predates my apology by months. Memory rattled the cupboard, and Maya said, so the pitch was planned before the feeling. Shame moved across his face, and Jordan said, I never saw this version. The kettle stuttered, and Maya said, your name was enough to threaten me. He backed from the table, and Jordan said, my negligence opened the door. A clock argued with the silence, and Maya said, negligence is a quiet betrayal. He found a breath, and Jordan said, let me prove who forged the path. The email blinked like a warning buoy, and Maya said, prove it with light, not promises. Truth waited at the threshold and would not blink first. Jordan called his lawyer on speaker, and Maya said, keep it on the table. The voice came clipped and careful, and lawyer said, the clause was drafted by Price Strategic. Jordan stiffened at the name, and Jordan said, Vanessa's consultancy. A file chimed in their inbox, and lawyer said, metadata shows a stamp from your operations manager. The ceiling hummed like doubt, and Maya said, who controls the vault? Jordan swallowed the answer, and Jordan said, I do, or I should. The voice softened, and lawyer said, there is also a clinic intake form with her email. Heat surged and cooled, and Maya said, they mapped my body without consent. The line held its breath, and lawyer said, we can file an injunction today. Jordan reached for steadiness, and Jordan said, do it, and copy Maya. The call ended with a legal hush, and Maya said, I need to know if you benefited from this plan. His gaze lifted like a plea, and Jordan said, it benefited the ghost of my fear, not me. She let the words stand and waited for proof to rise. A buzz at the door broke the standoff, and Tasha said, "I brought something." She set a flash drive on the table, and Tasha said, "Vanessa tried to recruit me last week." Maya stared like the horizon moved, and Maya said, "You met her and told no one." Tasha lifted her chin, and Tasha said, "I needed proof before flames." Jordan reached for the drive, and Jordan said, "What's on it?" Tasha tapped the tin case, and Tasha said, "Audio from her bragging about steering your legacy narrative." The fridge motor clicked alive, and Maya said, "Play it." Voices spilled out, slick with strategy, and Vanessa said, "If she carries it, we hold the story and the stake." The words landed like iron, and Jordan said, "She turned love into leverage." Tasha exhaled steady, and Tasha said, "Now you have receipts." Maya's shoulders squared, and Maya said, "Receipts and lines in stone." The room shifted toward action, and Jordan said, "I will testify to negligence and cut her access." Tasha's eyes warmed, and Tasha said, "Then start today, before the spin starts you." They met in the lobby to end what lingered, and Vanessa said, "You look righteous." Jordan did not flinch, and Jordan said, "You forged control with my name." Perfume stabbed the air, and Vanessa said, "You were always too sentimental to lead." Maya stepped into the center, and Maya said, "You used my consent like collateral." Elevator doors gleamed like witnesses, and Vanessa said, "Power requires unpopular steps." Tasha's stare cut clean, and Tasha said, "Power without consent is theft." Vanessa tapped her phone, and Vanessa said, "Investors love certainty." Jordan's voice cooled, and Jordan said, "File notice to resign or face court." A beat shivered the marble, and Vanessa said, "You will bleed reputation." Maya did not blink, and Maya said, "We already bled dignity. Now we clot with truth." Security watched without moving, and Tasha said, "Walk." Vanessa held on to one last smile, and Vanessa said, "You will come back for order." The elevator shut on that echo, and no one chased it. Back upstairs, the quiet felt earned and fragile, and Maya said, "The twist was not love, it was the plan." Jordan leaned into the truth, and Jordan said, "I let structure stand where courage should have." Tasha rested a palm on the table, and Tasha said, "You both held your line when it mattered." The city pulsed beyond the window, and Maya said, "We protect what is private with teeth." His breath released like a knot, and Jordan said, "I will dismantle every door that let this happen." The inbox pinged with the filed injunction, and Tasha said, "Paper shields are up." Maya closed her eyes for a count, and Maya said, "I still need time to trust the floor." He met that need without flinching, and Jordan said, "I will build floorboards, not trapdoors." The clock found a softer rhythm, and Tasha said, "Let this be the chapter that changes posture." The day leaned toward evening, and Maya said, "No child, no vows, only patience and presence." He nodded as if signing in spirit, and Jordan said, "Presence is my only plan now." The twist settled, and the next breath felt possible. Morning found edges on everything, and Maya said, "Today we stand in court." Jordan tightened his tie, and Jordan said, "I brought truth and names." The hallway echoed with distant heels, and Tasha said, "Hold your center." A clerk called the docket, and Maya said, "No performance, only clarity." Paper rustled like small storms, and Jordan said, "My negligence let rot grow." The admission steadied them, and Tasha said, "Own it, then cut it out." The doors opened to fluorescent winter, and Maya said, "We protect consent as sacred." He nodded once, and Jordan said, "Consent is the law and a love." A reporter lifted a camera, and Tasha said, "Ignore lenses and chase light." Maya touched the thin scar memory left, and Maya said, "Fear will not narrate me." The judge took the bench, and Jordan said, "Price Strategic forged a future." Silence settled into rows, and Tasha said, "Anchor every word to proof." Maya breathed a clean, slow breath, and Maya said, "We tell it plain and leave the rest." The gavel rose like a beginning that refused to blink. Inside, microphones waited like traps, and Maya said, record the truth. Jordan faced the judge, and Jordan said, operations allowed unauthorized stamping. The lawyer slid exhibits forward, and Tasha said, receipts, not rumors. Metadata glowed on the screen. And Maya said, my name appears without my consent. The judge leaned in, and Jordan said, the clause named Vanessa, custodian. A whisper scratched the gallery, and Tasha said, read the dates out loud. The timeline cut through fog, and Maya said, drafted before any talk with me. Jordan's voice did not shake, and Jordan said, Price Strategic authored the harm. Aleph shifted in leather, and Tasha said, keep breathing in rhythm. The judge watched the waveform clip, and Maya said, she called my body a stake. The word hung with iron, and Jordan said, we resigned, we bar, we repair. Counsel nodded to the bench, and Tasha said, ask for injunction plus audit. The judge set a pen down like a verdict that had a spine. Vanessa took the stand with a glossed smile, and Maya said, listen for the tell. Jordan watched the posture harden, and Jordan said, she will dress control as care. The attorney asked simple questions, and Tasha said, short answers reveal more. Vanessa painted certainty like silk, and Maya said, silk cannot hide a chain. The audio clip filled the room, and Vanessa said, if she carries it, we hold the story. Gasps snapped the quiet, and Jordan said, that is leverage, not love. The judge raised a brow, and Tasha said, stay measured, stay precise. Vanessa's gaze sought escape, and Maya said, we are not props for your narrative. Counsel placed the clinic intake form, and Jordan said, consent line blank, contact line hers. The bench marked the exhibit, and Tasha said, let the paper speak. Vanessa reached for a new script, and Maya said, no script, only fact. The silence that followed felt like something heavy finally set down. Recess rang like a bell for breath, and Maya said, my hands are steady. Jordan leaned on the railing, and Jordan said, shame has fewer teeth now. Tasha stood between them and the cameras, and Tasha said, eat a small truth and keep walking. A reporter called a question, and Maya said, we speak inside, not out here. The sky cleared to a thinner blue, and Jordan said, I almost let legacy replace love. The words cooled the heat, and Tasha said, wrong turns still laid home if you stop. The courthouse steps felt less steep, and Maya said, I choose privacy without apology. He met her calm, and Jordan said, I choose presence without terms. The break clock toward closure, and Tasha said, finish strong and quiet. A text from counsel blinked, and Maya said, judge wants final statements. Jordan folded doubt-like paper, and Jordan said, I carry what I broke and rebuild anyway. The doors opened, and resolve walked in first. Back before the bench, the room held its breath, and Maya said, consent was displaced by ambition. Jordan faced the judge, and Jordan said, we ask protection and audit. Counsel ended with a clean line, and Tasha said, let dignity be the remedy. The judge spoke with tempered steel, and judge said, injunction granted, access revoked, audit ordered. A collective exhale eased the wood, and Maya said, we keep our names in our own mouths. Jordan's shoulders lowered, and Jordan said, no more contracts over care. The clerk stamped orders, and Tasha said, paper with teeth. Vanessa stared at a point beyond consequence, and Maya said, we exit without gloating. The gavel closed the arc, and Jordan said, we go home and cook in quiet. Outside, light pooled like a soft verdict, and Tasha said, protect what this costs. The day did not cheer, it steadied, and Maya said, we survived the fire and kept our skin. Evening folded softly around the apartment, and Maya said, the noise is gone, but the echo remains. Jordan set his phone in a drawer, and Jordan said, no alerts, only us. The kettle hummed like a quiet promise, and Maya said, I want a life that does not flinch. He leaned on the counter, and Jordan said, then we practice steadiness daily. The window caught the last amber line of sun, and Maya said, I am not a vessel, I am a person who chooses. His eyes held the line and Jordan said, I honor choosing, even when it is no. The clock nudged them past old patterns, and Maya said, we will not speak about children until I invite it. He breathed acceptance, and Jordan said, I will not raise the subject before you do. Steam curled over the mugs, and Maya said, I also need distance from your boardroom ghosts. He nodded, and Jordan said, the audit will cut the roots and name the names. The city sighed below their window, and Maya said, I want quiet with weight, not quiet that hides. His voice settled, and Jordan said, I will be visible in peace and conflict. The day closed like a book that finally knew its ending for now, and they stood still. Morning unspooled with firmer light, and Maya said, today we reset the apartment. Jordan carried a box labeled past, and Jordan said, old scripts go in here. Tasha arrived with tape and a grin, and Tasha said, archivist of boundaries reporting. The living room opened under their hands, and Maya said, this corner is ours, not for guests. He set a plant by the window, and Jordan said, growth where sunlight lands. Tasha stacked the legal binders, and Tasha said, evidence goes to storage, not to your chest. The air felt easier, and Maya said, I never learned how to live without guarding. He paused with tenderness, and Jordan said, I will guard with you, not over you. Tasha pressed a label flat, and Tasha said, call this shelf peace. The name held, and Maya said, peace with a spine. He draped a throw on the couch, and Jordan said, we rest without bracing. Tasha pocketed the empty tape roll, and Tasha said, reset complete, charge for maintenance daily. The room breathed like a steady lung, and laughter landed gently. At the office, the audit team moved like surgeons, and Jordan said, access logs on screen, 3.1. A consultant nodded to the timeline, and Tasha said, follow the stamps, then the money. Maya watched from a chair near the glass wall, and Maya said, transparency is the only apology I trust. The operations manager swallowed hard, and Jordan said, you will account for every instance. The room wrote its own history in rows, and Tasha said, let the spreadsheet testify. Maya let a breath out slow, and Maya said, I do not want revenge. I want repair. The consultant flagged a pattern, and Jordan said, then the vault needs dual control with audit trail. A printer coughed truth onto paper, and Tasha said, policies with teeth, not gums. The skyline glittered without gloating, and Maya said, when this is done, we leave here lighter. He signed the new control matrix, and Jordan said, I resign unilateral authority. The team recorded the change, and Tasha said, close with a memo that centers consent. The door clicked shut on the old era, and it stayed shut. Dusk found them at the neighborhood diner, and Maya said, I want a ritual that is ordinary. Jordan lifted a menu with reverence, and Jordan said, fries and forgiveness on Fridays. Tasha arched a brow, and Tasha said, forgiveness must be earned weekly. Neon buzzed above the window, and Maya said, I will not move faster than my safety. He folded the napkin once, and Jordan said, safety chooses the speed limit. The server poured coffee that smelled like second chances, and Tasha said, drink slow and mean it. Maya traced a bead of water down her glass, and Maya said, I am learning comfort without collapse. He nodded, and Jordan said, I am learning patience without panic. The booth held their promises without ceremony, and Tasha said, make it boring and real. The street eased toward night, and Maya said, next week, same booth, same pace. He smiled, small and sure, and Jordan said, same booth, same pace, same truth. The ritual began in small bites. Night gathered on the rooftop like velvet, and Maya said, I carried fear like armor. Jordan leaned on the rail, and Jordan said, I carried pride like a map to nowhere. The city pulsed below, and Tasha said, armor and maps are heavy when you need hands free. A breeze braided warmth into the cool, and Maya said, I do not promise a future. I promise today. He faced the horizon without grabbing it, and Jordan said, today is enough to do right. Stars pricked the sky like patient witnesses, and Tasha said, Let quiet be the proof, not performance. The wind tugged at their edges, and Maya said, when fear visits, I will name it aloud. He met the plan squarely, and Jordan said, when shame visits, I will not hide it. A siren flared then softened, and Tasha said, you both learned a hard language. The night did not solve them, it steadied them. And Maya said, we keep walking without rushing hope. Jordan closed his eyes and breathed, and Jordan said, presence, not prophecy. The rooftop held, and did not waver. Morning moved like a quiet vow over the table, and Maya said, today I want ordinary peace. Jordan set 2 plates down, and Jordan said, then we eat and breathe. The kettle sighed, and Maya said, no forecasts, no tests. He met her gaze without grabbing it, and Jordan said, presence only. Butter softened like nerves unclenching, and Maya said, if fear arrives, we name it, not flee. He nodded once, and Jordan said, I will stand still with you. The window held a small sky, and they let it be enough. They walked the river path where geese stitched ripples, and Maya said, I will not trade tenderness for speed. Jordan matched her pace, and Jordan said, I will not chase you, I will walk with you. Wind brushed their sleeves, and Maya said, we protect the quiet we earn. A cyclist rang a bell and passed, and Jordan said, we keep routine like prayer. The water kept its steady grammar, and they learned it. At a small block gathering, neighbors offered stories like bread, and Tasha said, you two look less breakable. Maya laughed softly, and Maya said, we chose simple and strong. A curious question floated from across the table, and Jordan said, our life is not a headline. Tasha bumped shoulders with them, and Tasha said, guard your middle, not just the edges. Music loosened the air, and their privacy held. Back home, they cleared a shelf for small rituals, and Maya said, this jar holds our hard truths. Jordan dropped a folded note inside, and Jordan said, shame goes here to breathe and leave. She added one more, and Maya said, fear too. The lamp cast a patient circle, and Jordan said, we forgive in practice, not speeches. She touched his hand, and Maya said, slow is sacred. The room answered by staying warm. Night gathered on the balcony like hush, and the city throbbed below. Maya watched the dark turn velvet and said, I am not promising forever. He did not reach, and Jordan said, I am promising tonight. A plane stitched a thin star line, and Maya said, then meet me here again tomorrow, still gentle. He breathed steady, and said, I will arrive without a net. The wind carried their silence, and it did not break.